vote on the stipulated expulsion. If I could have a motion, please.
I move to accept the recommendation of the stipulated expulsion.
All right, we have
I
a,
second that.
we have a motion by Mr. Unger and a second by Mr. Banfield. We will now take the vote. Mr. Unger,
Yes.
Mr. Banfield, Ms. Dobler-Drew, Mr. Buckman. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. And I am a yes. So the motion carries 4-0 with 1 absence. Thank you. Or 1 abstention. Sorry. All right. I'll try and be all technical here. Yeah. Okay. And next, do we have consensus on the order of business? Everyone good? All right. And, oh, well, we did the stipulated student expulsion, did that out of order, but we're still good. All right, next we have student representatives to the board and Atticus. Hooray, thank you for coming.
Of course.
We're ready for you.
All right. Hey, everyone.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Hey, everyone. Super great to see you all again. So San Luis Obispo High School has been fun since we got back from break. Really important thing off the bat, we had our blood drive on Friday, and our blood drive was a huge success. A lot of student and staff and even parent participation in that. And a really cool statistic, our blood drive saved approximately 75 lives. So for all the participants, that's definitely a huge pat on the back. And yeah, it's just a really great event to, help people out and give back to the community. Likewise, kind of on the theme with community outreach and community service, our Penny Drive, or Penny Wars as we're advertising it, is a fundraiser for the National Mental Health Awareness Association. And it basically runs as like each different class, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, will get a jug, and then on their way to school every morning, students can drop pennies or cash or however they please in those jugs. And then at the end of the year, we will collect all of the money and we'll see who has raised the most will get spirit points. But overall, it'll just be a great way to raise money for a good cause. And I think it's really interesting that our ASB has kind of taken a direction in community service this year. It's been a big theme of our class, and I think it should continue in the years following because it's great to, give back to the community that we feel lucky to be a part of. So super great to see that. Harvard Model Congress took place last weekend, and for people that don't know what Harvard Model Congress is, or HMC, it is a mock Congress that is in San Francisco run by Harvard students. San Luis Obispo is a representative high school there. So out of like 10 or 15 high schools, delegates go there to participate and just debate, kind of learn the inner workings of our American government and sharpen speech and debate skills. So San Luis Obispo High School was able to go there last weekend. Super great opportunity for our school to participate in that. So hopefully we get to keep doing that as well. Intramural futsal is our newest intramural sports tournament. So our commissioners of lunchtime activities have been hard at work making sure students are, participating on campus, and those are super fun. So super excited for those to get underway as well. A really cool thing that San Luis Obispo High School athletics are doing is we're doing a future Tiger Night. So students from local elementary schools, I'm not sure of the exact dates, I'm sorry, but over the next couple of weeks, we'll be able to go to San Luis Obispo High School sporting events and get in for free, and as well get free Tiger merch provided by our booster club. I think there's a home game. There's a home game this Friday for San Luis Obispo High School that is one of those participating nights. So as I, watch the basketball team play, it'll be super cool to see the future Tigers with their spirit out in the crowd. So it's super awesome for that. And then last but definitely not least, we have our sophomore class officers have announced their theme for our winter formal, which will be snowball. So not like snowballs, but a snowball. And so to be winter themed, there will probably be like snowflakes put up. So that'll be really cool. And it's actually the second year that our students will have student DJs. So last year, Riley Wilkerson and Cesar Hallfield took over the turntables, and it was a great night. It was awesome to see the student DJs. And this year it'll actually be myself and my friend Thomas Pyatt, who is our ASB treasurer. So we'll be up there. Hopefully we can keep carrying on the tradition because it was really fun last year. And yeah, that's pretty much all I have for everyone. Thanks for having me and letting me share. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for coming as always. Before Alana is going to join us online, but before doing so, I'm a little rusty at all this, so excuse me. I forgot to mention that translation services are available on Zoom. If anyone requires translation, go to at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little globe that says interpretation under that, and press on that, and we have an interpreter who will assist you throughout the meeting. And thank you, Mandy, for reminding me of that. So next, let's have Alana from Morro Bay High School help us out, talk to us about what's going on there.
Thank you. Sorry I'm over Zoom today. Are you able to hear me well enough?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, awesome. So first up, we haven't really had much in the past, I guess just 3 days from last week, and then today. But next week, I believe our Dance Fusion is hosting a countywide high school dance convention called Dance Beyond. It'll be on Saturday, January 28th. Then we also ended up deciding on our senior grad night, and it'll be the day after graduation, and we're going to Universal Studios, which is kind of cool. For sports, we hosted a statewide girls invitational wrestling tournament last Saturday. And then this Friday and Saturday, we have our CIT wrestling tournament at Morro Bay High, and we're having different groups around campus volunteer to help out. So ASB is having a couple students help out in the morning and afternoon, as well as water polo, volleyball, and a couple of other sports teams, which is really cool. And they each organization can benefit from volunteering as well, which is a really interesting way of working it this year, which is really cool. And then also our soccer and basketball teams have been doing really well in their seasons. Next week on the 25th, the Joseph Castro for Hawthorne Union will be at our school for a listening session with students, staff, and parents. I think he's come in a couple of different times to do listening sessions, and I've been a part of it, and it's definitely a really interesting process and cool that we're able to do that at our school. Our counselors visited the 8th graders at Loams last week to begin sharing and talking about Morro Bay High, and Mr. Scaldi and our counselors will go to Cayucas within the next couple weeks to talk to their 8th graders as well. And then because of the storm and the floods, the Morro Bay City Manager, Scott Collins, reached out, and our students will likely be volunteering this week to help residents impacted by flooding, especially those that are on the streets near our school, which is really cool. And then lastly, we finalized our student value statement, which is now at Morro Bay High. We exemplify the values of kindness and respect to create a safe and equitable learning space for all. We do not discriminate on the basis of race, gender, ethnicity, sex, sexual orientation, income, ability, and/or self-expression. Hate speech is not tolerated. All should feel safe, welcome, and included, able to express themselves and experience joy. Collectively, students and adults, we commit to demonstrating these values both on and off our campus. And that is our finalized student value statement. And that is all the information I have for Morro Bay High this week. Thank you.
Alana, you said there you didn't have much to report, but that was quite the report, quite a lot of information there. Thank you so much. I love the student value statement, and I'm pretty impressed that you're already looking forward to grad night, but I understand. So, and thank you both very much for coming and sharing what's going on at your respective high schools. It really means a lot to us to know what's going on and that you take the time to attend the meetings and report. As always, you're welcome to stay. But we understand if you have things like schoolwork to work on and leave. But thanks for taking the time. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, this evening, our school program highlights is from Laguna.
Yes, Laguna Middle School is up tonight, and both Mr. Meinert and Mrs. Stanford are here with a couple of rock star students from Laguna to share some highlights of what's happening there, please.
All right, thank you. Let me see if I can pull this up. All right, beautiful. Let me just share my screen so those on Zoom are able to see. And it looks like the host has not yet enabled screen sharing. Thank you. All right, perfect. All right, great. So there's a few of us that are gonna be a part of this today. So excuse the kind of rotating chairs as we go through this, but I'm just gonna do a very brief introduction. So we're here to share just a few of the updates on things that are going on at Laguna. We're really excited to do that. It's hard to take half of a school year and condense it into just a few minutes. So bear with us as we just try to share some of the fun things happening at our school site. So here's a couple of the highlights. I'm going to share with you our school goals. Ms. Stanford is going to share a little bit about just some of the things that we're doing as a school site to set a positive tone on campus for our students and also to celebrate the great things they're doing. And then we have a few of our students who Ms. Stanford will introduce momentarily, who are going to share some of the activities and events and some of the highlights that are just building our school community. And then I'll get to end sharing a little bit, honing in on academic success and some of the things we're doing that are helping our students succeed and have great new experiences. And that'll be kind of the way that our presentation will flow today. So I'm going to jump right in and just share with you our school site developed 2 goals, and many of them are overlapping really purposely with the board priorities and goals for the school year. The first one is that all staff and students are safe, connected, and supported as a part of our school community. That encompasses quite a bit of things. And our students are going to spend a good chunk of their time sharing about ways and things that are connecting our students and staff to our school. And the second one is that all of our students are learning and thriving. And we purposely selected words that end in ing because it's an ongoing process, right? It's not just, okay, we're done with that now. And so really pursuing that, these are goals our staff talks about in every staff meeting and really tries to bring everything we do back to this core of seeing our staff and students safe, connected, and supported, and then also seeing our students learning and thriving. Another little detail that we think is important to share as a part of our school's process this year is we're actually using Schools to Watch, which is a great nationwide rubric that just gives us the tools as a school to look at how we're doing and then look for ways that we as a team think that we can continue to improve. And so that's a process we're currently in the midst of as a staff, reflecting together, and then also looking to bring in some stakeholder reflections as well in that process. So those are things that are a part of what we're doing this year. And I'm going to hand it off to Ms. Stanford to share a little bit about our Lancer Pride. So thank you, Ms. Stanford. Ms. Stanford, for those of you who don't know, is my assistant principal and does a wonderful job in this area. So thank you.
So we focus on Lancer Pride, and the acrostic poem was actually developed by Ariane Rollinger a few years ago, one of our English teachers. These are the traits that we want to see in our students. We want them to be leaders. We want them taking action. We want them to show nobility. We want them to be compassionate. We want them to excel. We want them to be resilient. These are ways that we're preparing our students for a life of purpose. Underneath each trait, you'll see that there's attributes there. Every week we talk about the trait and then we talk about the attribute of the week. We introduce that in advisory and advisory slides. We piggyback that with a lesson from Second Step. So students are getting that social emotional learning while they're learning about each of those attributes. Teachers frequently recognize students for Lancer Pride in the classroom by issuing sweepstakes tickets. At the end of the week, we do a sweepstakes drawing where the kids get a prize. A prize is just a personal pizza from Woodstocks, but they get acknowledged over the loudspeaker or on our Lancer News network, just knowing what, so we're announcing what they did that demonstrated Lancer Pride. We also have a wall of fame. So teachers will also nominate 2 to 4 students for our wall of fame every week of students that have demonstrated those attributes. The wall of fame is hung up in the main hallway on our campus. It's also announced in our parent newsletter. We do a student recognition every about 6 weeks once we've completed a cycle of the trait and then the attributes that make up that trait. We show Lancer Pride on Fridays where all of our students wear their teachers that are our t-shirts that are PTA purchased. Also, when it comes to disciplinary action, we always revolve the restorative conversations around Lancer Pride. We talk about taking pride in our campus, how we as people want to show, we want to show pride. We want to treat students, staff, our campus with respect. So that's Lancer Pride. I'd like to introduce a couple of our students. We have Lucy Beck, who's our president, and Sebastian Duenas, who's our vice president. There they are.
Thank you, Ms. Stanford. Today, we will just be sharing with you some highlights from our year so far.
So to begin, We have many opportunities for leadership. We've had several student council meetings with representatives from each homeroom. And in student council, we talk about recent events to get feedback on what students like and what they would like to change.
There are a few pictures of our ASB class and also Student Senate. Student Senate is a diverse group of students who meet and discuss the results from the Youth Truth Survey to create positive change in all of the schools. A tradition we started this year was themed Thursday dress-up days. Every other Thursday, we pick a theme and everyone dresses up according to it. On this slide, we have pictures of Twin Day, Mismatch Day, Pajama Day, Tropical Day, and then in the bottom, we have our costume contest from Halloween.
Here's our staff who also did a great job on modeling school spirit and joining us in our dress up days. Before winter break, they surprised all the students with a holiday sweaters themed day for staff only.
Some ASB activities we've had this year. When World Cup was going on, we had a World Cup watching party at lunch.
And the Save Promise Club started, oh, my bad. We also put one dance in October, the Monster Mash. We had lots of fun booths and games and snacks, and we're hoping that our next dance, the Snowball, will be just as awesome.
Just like the high school. Another new tradition we started this year is Flamingo Fridays. On every Friday, we pick a teacher and decorate their classroom with random flamingo themed decor. We also announce fun facts about them over the intercom and then deliver them cookies with that awesome costume.
Another thing we did is the Save Promise Club started meeting in September. The goals of the club was to educate, empower, encourage, and engage students to end school violence and promote positive interactions. San Luis Obispo Police Chief Rick Scott came to speak and personally applaud the interested students for being a part of this new effort. Other clubs we have included Garden Club, Celebrating Cultures of the World Club, Friday Night Live, Gay Straight Alliance, and Wings of Fire Club.
For our intramural volleyball, the winning homerooms were Mr. Whitman and Miss Allen's, and our upcoming intramural sports are soccer and basketball. I believe there's one picture there of mock trial. I'm in mock trial, and we are working hard to prepare ourselves for the competitions that start next month. Band and choir have both had a couple of performances, including the winter concert at the PAC. I went to one of them and it was really good. They're very good.
Sports. So in the sports, we have decided to have the opportunity to participate in athletic teams during their time at Laguna Middle School. We encouraged all LAMS students, staff, parents, and guardians, and community members to come support our student competition. Here's some highlights from the year. We had the girls volleyball, which contained 26 students. 7th grade got an 11-2 overall record, and 8th grade got 13-0 for season. Second in every county tournament. Golf, which had around 60 plus students on average. It's because they kept coming and going. This was a new sport this year, and many students had their first exposure to golf. Los Osos Middle School and Laguna were the only schools in the county who had teams as we began this new sport in the middle school level. Cross country had 53 students and an average of 50 students at practice. Many students began the season never running a distance before they ended the season able to run a 5K 5 kilometers continuously. Boys basketball had 27 students, both 7th and 8th grade teams won their end of season tournaments. Girls basketball has 25 students and their season's currently underway. They're playing Mesa Middle School today. We're looking forward for our upcoming seasons of soccer, wrestling, boys volleyball, track and field, and water polo.
And that's it for us. Thank you.
Thank you both so much. Great job. So aren't they just such great student leaders?
They're
Both
wonderful.
involved in so many things and do such a great job. So thank you. All right, I have a few other highlights for you to share. So first, I just want to acknowledge that there are so many amazing, great things happening in our classrooms. And I wish that I could just go through one at a time, each teacher's room, and just share about the cool things that I've had a chance to see and that our students are learning. Here's just a couple photos just highlighting some of the enthusiasm. That one on the top left, especially, that was in a math discussion where they're group sharing. And I just love the expression of enthusiasm on his face. So our students are constantly being engaged by our teachers and learning and growing. And our goal is their learning and ongoing thriving. A couple of the highlights I want to really focus in on. First, we just recently had our Nobel Prize finalists present. And if you don't know, Nobel Prize is something that's been a long tradition at Laguna, and it's something where every 8th grader creates a science project and then presents in front of their class. And then the science teachers determine who the finalists are, and those students come back and do a presentation over a few hours. Each of them goes one at a time. And it's in front of a panel of judges and a group of people here to observe, and a finalist is chosen, a winner. And in this year, we had the James Webb Telescope presentation by Taylor Wakeman, and she is our grand winner as far as the presentation goes. And be on the lookout. We have a YouTube video coming of highlights of their presentations, but she did a phenomenal job, as did all of our finalists. So I list them all there. It was very fun to get to watch them present.
Mr. Buckman?
Are you finished?
I have another thing, but
Wait.
okay. And then a couple other highlights. Counselor support is just so important to share. Our counseling team does so many things to support our students socially and emotionally, and then also academically. And so I thought I'd share that right now, even as Morro Bay High was sharing, our counselors are meeting with all of our 8th graders and presenting in their classes and helping them learn with their college and career inventories about things that they might have aptitudes for or interests in as they start to look towards high school and beyond. And so that's something that our counselors are constantly looking at, even as we build these 6 and 4 year plans as a district to help focus our students. And then kind of another layer to that that's new this year is we also have a CTE counselor that we share with Los Osos Middle School. And that person really focuses in on helping our historically underrepresented students find what their passion is, whether it's in a CTE program or not, but really looking to use CTE programs to help our students be college and career ready. And so those two things have gone hand in hand this year and will continue to do so. And it connects really directly with another thing that we're really excited about around CTE at our school. And that's some new CTE introductory courses. So we started some new electives at Laguna Middle School, and here's some pictures. You can see in the top left, a couple of students after they had just finished a programming assignment where they'd actually programmed a message to flash across with some hearts at the end. And it was all written by code in their programming class. That's a part of our wheel. You can also see a picture in the top middle of some students working in the engineering class on their flight and space projects. And that's a class that we are really proud of, and also partnering with some local partners like ACI Jet to be able to really help our students see some practical applications and local connections that they can have with these skills. And the bottom left, you can see our students hard at work in our new Lancer News Network studio that is built after and modeled after our Tiger News network that we have at San Luis Obispo High School. And our students are currently at 2 days a week, and actually just right now transitioning to try to do every day of the week news for our students as a part of our announcements. So really fun thing. Our students are really grabbing a hold of it and doing that. And then the last two slides are both from culinary in the top right in class. And then I wanted to include the bottom right because that was actually a work experience opportunity for our students, where they actually helped at the foundation gala and they assisted with serving. And then they also actually made the bread at that event if you have the opportunity to attend. And so just a great, again, chance for these young students to have opportunities to practice and put these skills into practice. So some great new programs that we're really proud of at Laguna. And then one other really big thing we want to focus in on is our English learners. And so I thought I'd share just really briefly a new thing we're doing this year that we're really proud of. We have 68 English learners, and we have finished now developing an English language support plan for every single one of them. So every student has an individualized plan that outlines how they're doing academically based on state data and teacher input. It includes goals for each of their academic core content areas of how they're going to grow in their next steps, and also includes details for every teacher to have at their fingertips of appropriate next steps or accommodations to help support these students as they continue to develop their English language. So something we're really proud of. It's developed a lot of really great conversations and collaborations among our staff, and we really think it's going to help our students immensely as we move forward. So really great thing that we're proud of. And then the picture is just something that was really fun that our teachers did. So Miss Bulabar, our Spanish teacher, and Miss Rollinger, our EL teacher, worked together to have a collaboration where students got to practice their Spanish and get to know one another. And then our wonderful food service team provided some Spanish food themed snacks, which was really fun. And so the students had a great time. And so that's what that picture is at the bottom of that slide. So that's a little bit about our English program and how we're working to support our English learners. And then I would definitely be remiss to not also shout out our yearbook team. And this is a picture of them. They provided most of the photos in this presentation and do an amazing job and are doing great work on preparing our yearbook this year. So thank you very much. That's all.
Go ahead.
So as I try to do most years, I did attend the Nobel Prize. I mean, it was, as always, often and awesome, and you didn't get to read most of the titles. So I'm going to take my prerogative. I'm going to read some of these other titles of the finals. Okay, so the James Webb Telescope, genetics, fish adaptations, and I've sat through most of these. The color of light affects photosynthesis, optical illusions, baking leaveners, genetic engineering, vaccines and herd immunity, and your mind on music. And I have to say, no offense to everybody, but I thought the mind on music was pretty good. So should have been maybe a tie. But thank you very much. And please thank the staff.
Yes.
That's really my goal with this. Please
will
thank the
do.
staff.
Yeah,
And the parents that were there. Oh my
they
God.
take
there
great
was
pride in their
lots of
work.
Parents.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mr. Banfield.
I apologize. I should have said it's career technical education. So typically they're classes that are a part of pathways that help prepare students potentially for a career directly out of high school. Yeah, and I didn't mention it, but each of our new electives that we have are introductions or taste testers for CT pathways that exist at San Luis Obispo High School, trying to give students opportunities to start to see things they may be interested in before they get there.
Ms. Doppler-Drew.
Yeah, well, Mr. Banfield, this is one of his first board meetings, but for 2 years, we've been working on the CTE thing. And I know Mr. Buckman and I are very enthusiastic about, I hope I can speak. Yeah, that we're really enthusiastic about having this 6-year plan and them being able to know what the strong suits of their abilities are. And being, each one of them is so unique. And they all have their unique strong suits. And this will get them started earlier and appreciating what the CTE has to offer because it's very concrete. I know that there's like when I've gone on school tours, I met at Morro Bay High, for example, a young man who was obviously a very abstract thinker. You know, he could probably go to Harvard if he wanted to, but he just loves being in there doing the 3D printer and those things. Those things are, when we touch things, we come into contact with reality. So that we just love the CTE program. We're just rooting for it to grow, grow, grow.
Agreed.
Thank you. Thanks so much. And
Thank you.
you, students. Yay.
Great
Thank you
job.
so much for coming, taking the time. And thank you, Mr. Calandro, for coming, for attending to see. Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. Of course. Thank you. All right, next on the agenda is correspondence, and I need to, at the time the agenda was published, no official correspondence had been received. So we will move on to public comment at this time. And the board, did you have something? Oh, at this point in the agenda, the board welcomes comments on matters of district interest. The board will listen, but cannot engage in discussion or take action on items not listed on the agenda due to the Brown Act. Each speaker will have 3 minutes that will be timed. The countdown clock will appear on the screen as it is being set up now, and you can take a look and know when your time is advancing. We have a strict time limit. You must end within the 3 minutes. So at this time, this is for general public comment. If anyone has items that they would like to address with regard to a specific agenda item, you may wait for that agenda item to come up when the board is addressing it. Or if you would rather address an agenda topic now, you may do so. It's my understanding we have a yellow slip from and there are yellow slips on the table. If you could fill one out, it's helpful, but not necessary. And it's my understanding we have one, and that is from Mr. Salazar. Am I correct?
Hello, thank you for having us here.
Thank you. Your time is starting now.
All right, well, I'm here on behalf of my daughter, who's currently enrolled in a 3-year-old co-op preschool through the adult school. And we were recently informed that due to the proposed staggered expansion of TK and the expected reduction in demand, that the 4-year-old co-op program would be canceled for the next school year. This has kind of left my family and a large group of us in that community, in that classroom, in a position that feels somewhat impossible to navigate at the moment. And we have a couple concerns, both as a family and as a community, regarding the decision for expanding TK in a staggered manner and for the closure of the 4-year-old adults co-op preschool program. So first, with the expansion of the staggered expansion of TK, by pulling a small portion of the TK class that will be expected to go into kindergarten together in 2024, we feel that a small group is going to be left behind, essentially, without the same resources available to them in the TK classroom next year. After school programs, speech therapy, counseling, like these tools that they just won't have a full year of access to in the same manner, especially if they have to go through a private preschool program. She'll also have to do all of this, like catching up essentially at the beginning of her preschool or kindergarten career in 2024 as the youngest person in her class. So we feel that these kids are kind of being left behind. This might be at a slight disadvantage. We know that this is coming from the state, so we just hope that the district can address some of these concerns regarding just this feeling that some of us might not have access to some of the same programs that children in TK will. Second, because of the reduced demand, we were told that the 4-year-old co-op program will be canceled for next year. Telling us 9 months beforehand might seem like a good enough lead time, but just practically in the last week, a lot of us felt that it hasn't been. The story has been shared by a lot of us that essentially there are no programs available that are open. It's waitlist after waitlist after waitlist. And the situation just kind of feels hopeless, where we are now being told we don't have TK or a preschool option for us, since the 4-year-old program was essentially a legacy program where we could expect to advance. On that note, there was a group of about 10 of us who were expecting to advance to the 4-year-old program who now are kind of left without any options at the moment. Just for those, we just hope that the district can address some of these concerns, and we'd like to hopefully see the 4-year-old program be reinstated. We understand that there's a lot of reasons why these things happen or these decisions are made, but whatever help we can get, we would really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't have any other in-person public comment requests. Right, we have a written public comment that Mr. Unger will now read.
Thank you. This is from Andrea Wogsland. We received the letter on behalf of SLCUSD from Leslie O'Connor ending the 4-year-old preschool class starting fall 2023. The California Department of Social Services Child Care and Development Division's Infrastructure Grant Program, CCDD-IGP, has $150 million appropriated in grants for new construction and major renovation of childcare programs. Funds shall be used to make extensive alterations, structural changes, and/or major renovation to existing childcare facilities and for construction to build new childcare spaces. The grant must be used to increase licensed spaces by renovating or building out an existing facility by adding classrooms, constructing a brand new center-based facility. Up to $1.5 million would be available if applied for by January 31st, 2023. Is SLCUSD pursuing this grant opportunity?
Thank you. Now, if there's anyone who is joining us by Zoom this evening who wishes to address the board in public comment, please use the raise your hand icon, and Ms. Dawson will let me know. All right, seeing no one, we will end public comment and go on to our superintendent's updates. And the first is the business and budget update. Mr. Pinkerton.
Yeah, we have a lot on the agenda, but I just wanted to quickly give some kudos to our building, grounds, maintenance, custodial crews, both through the storm on Monday and Tuesday, and just going out roads, checking things. We found several things at our school sites throughout that needed to be corrected, right, and taken care of, and they were there. Even though everyone else had gone home for the day, they stayed, right? So, and then of course, all weekend with the recent storm, as the board knows, Mr. Bonin going around with his crew and again, checking on sites, making sure they're not flooded, making sure that everything is accessible, dealing with leaks, those types of things. And they did a yeoman's job, making sure that, our sites were ready to go today with school coming back out. And then lastly, again, kudos to Mr. Bonin. He actually took the time to reach out to all the other districts around just to check in. How you doing? Do you need anything? How can San Luis Coastal help you? So it's just nice to have that, community feel and connection, I think, with all the school districts. And so, again, kudos to him and his team for the work that they did.
Thank you, Mr. Unger.
I just wanted to also add my thanks to Mr. Bonin and his team. I, for one, appreciated the regular updates that I received regarding the condition of the schools. And so that I did get an email from a local resident asking what we were doing to make sure that our school sites were safe and ready to go. And I was able to answer that we were on the ground, that we were having our people work, that we were putting in as much overtime as necessary, and that the board was being advised of that. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Mr. Buckman.
Yeah, so I want to Chris, thank you very much for saying a lot of what I wanted to say. However, I did want to tell Luke Skywalker and Star Wars to watch out because we have the best stormtroopers.
Thank you. And yes, I very much appreciated Mr. Bonin's
No, I did too.
detailed updates as well. They were very helpful. All right, next educational services update. Ross.
Yes, thank you. Just one update this evening for you, but I think it's a really important and impactful update. On Tuesday of last week, actually one of our days that we were closed, all of our administrators across the district participated in a workshop titled Hate Motivated Behavior. And we talked about that on school campuses. Josh Whiteside, our legal counsel, led this interactive workshop. We talked about identifying and handling situations. We talked about policy and regulations and what they tell us to do, how they support us. We talked about law as well. We talked about supporting staff and students throughout investigations and then after the fact as well. It was, as I said, an important conversation. It was very, very highly impactful on our administrators, and we're taking the next step in about a week and a half, and we're doing a workshop at our campuses with our staff on the same topic. So I'll give you feedback after that as well.
Thank you. All right, and next measures C and D.
Yeah, so for Measure D, again, completing some of our last projects at both comprehensive high schools, students and teachers did move into the middle of the 100 building at San Luis Obispo High School. So the new digital media labs, as well as the classrooms all along the front. Again, this is the top level of that building. Hoping to open up the cafeteria multipurpose room downstairs in probably about a month. But it was nice to get them, again, get some classes off of the district office hill back on the campus. And so I know those teachers are truly loving the view from their classrooms in the second story. And again, kudos to Mr. Bond and Steve Stewart, the custodial crew, and to the staff, right, who had to pack and who had to come back and unpack and be ready for the start of school. So, making that happen is definitely a lot of effort goes into it. We will be having a kind of a grand opening for the Morro Bay High School Theater, in that building, in the new choir room and drama room and backstage and those areas. They're going to be using that for the upcoming wrestling tournament. But we wanted to wait until we actually got the level seating in before we do kind of an official, grand opening for that. So a lot of excitement there. And then just lastly, for the public to know, we have 3 items tonight, which we're going to talk about right after this. But the board has held 2 study sessions on Measure C. Again, just going back and kind of step 1, starting with architecture and delivery methods and those types of things. So it's an opportunity for the public if they'd like to kind of learn more about this bond measure and kind of where we're headed. Those are held on a monthly basis. And so again, kudos to the board for spending the time to really learn about the bond measure priorities and make sure we're making the right decisions.
Thank you. All right. Our next item is, we have some resolutions here this evening, and the first is 9.01, a resolution certifying the results of the November 8th, 2022 election ballot. Mr. Pinkerton.
Yeah, so we actually have Katie Dobson from Jones Hall here, as well as John Isom in the Zoom background, if there's any questions that need to be answered tonight. But this first resolution is basically, to me, a celebration, right? Our community voted to pass Measure C, I should say, a $349 million bond measure. And tonight, this resolution basically certifies those election results. And so hopefully we'll start tonight with certifying that resolution. And I'm very excited, again, after the work that we got accomplished with Measure D, really excited to be able to bring that same, energy and excitement to all of our schools at San Luis Coastal, and really modernize all of our schools for our kids.
All right, this is an action item. If someone would make a motion on the resolution, please. We'll make our motion and then we'll go at this rate. Thank you, Mr. Buckman. Do you have a second? Mr. Banfield, a second. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to address us on this item? All right, seeing none, we're ready for a vote. Mr. Buckman, Mr. Banfield,
Yes.
Ms. Dobler-Drew, Mr. Unger.
Yes.
And I am a yes, so motion carries 5-0 with 1 absence. Our next resolution, moving right along, is adopting bylaws governing the Measure C22 Citizens Oversight Committee.
So yeah, as a requirement, passing a 55% bond measure, we have to develop a Citizens Bond Oversight Committee. So tonight, by this resolution, the board will be establishing a CBOC, a Citizens Bond Oversight Committee, as well as the bylaws that go with that. There, of course, is a select group of individuals that you have to have somebody from the tax association, parents. Can't be anybody who's an employee of the school district, but this group meets normally 4 times a year. So if not more, but we go over basically all of the expenditures for all of the projects that are related to the bond. We go over the annual budgets. They look at the annual performance audit as well as the regular financial audit. And then they always annually give the board a report. So they report back to the board on, kind of their findings over the course of the school year. So that's something that has been established through Measure D that we've kept going, which has been great. But this will be a brand new CBOC for Measure C. So should the board pass this tonight, we will begin advertising that out and putting it out into the newspaper, publications, those types of things, to get representatives that meet those goals. And then I have 60 days to pull that group together and bring those names back to the school board for approval.
Thank you. Anyone from the public wishing to address us on this item? Seeing none, we'll come back to the board for this. Requires a motion, please. Mr. Banfield?
I make a motion to approve this resolution.
Thank you. And Mr. Buckman seconds. Ready? All right, Mr. Banfield,
Yes.
Mr. Buckman, Ms. Dobler Drew, Mr. Unger. Yes, and I'm a yes also. So again, 5-0, 1 absence. And finally, a resolution regarding the Measure C bond sales.
So yes, so this next resolution, there's actually 2 documents that go along with that. One is the preliminary official statement, which there's actually one thing we need to change. It has Dr. Catherine Eisendrath Rogers' name there, who of course we're looking for a new board member for her seat. So we'll change that. Mrs. Dobson will change that moving forward. But those are really, that and the bond purchase agreement are actually just kind of draft documents. That's why there's a lot of empty spaces and marks, those types of things. And as the process unfolds, those will get filled in. So tonight's resolution basically is allowing us to go forward with our first bond sale. So this first bond sale is $90 million. Again, as the board learned in the first study session in January, there's a process that goes through where we go through a rating agency. There's just a lot of steps that go through this. But this first one tonight is to allow us to begin that process, is for the board to pass a resolution allowing us to move forward.
Thank you. Is there
Again,
anyone?
John Isom is here. Katie Dobson is here.
Yeah.
If the board has any
And
questions.
we appreciate you being here, Mr. Isom and Ms. Dobson. You are guiding us through this process, and we thank you. Anyone from the public, Ms. Dawson? This item, all right. This also is an action item. We need to adopt this resolution this evening. Anyone wanting to make this motion?
So moved.
Okay, Mr. Buckman, will you second Mr. Unger? Yes. All right, this is second by Mr. Unger. Mr. Buckman, Mr. Unger.
Yes.
Ms. Dobler Drew, Mr. Banfield,
Yes.
and I am a yes. All right, we're going to get Measure C underway. This is really exciting. Our schools and students will benefit greatly from this.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. We will move on to item 10.01, local control and accountability plan, process and outreach plan. Lots of plans. Mrs.
Yes.
Frost.
Thank you. Sorry, messing with the mic here. Happy to be here with you tonight, talking for the first of many times about our LCAP, the Local Control and Accountability Plan, and the process that we go through to create this document that's really supposed to support students across the district. Just wanted to kind of go back to basics as we talk about the LCAP. And there's a few important pieces on this slide here. A reminder that it is a 3-year plan that is updated annually. Actually, we are in the 3rd year. We are creating the 3rd year of this 3-year plan. So next year will be number 3 in our years of implementation of our current LCAP. Thank you so much. You'll notice when we start presenting the LCAP to you that there are some specific items that have to be included. We have to have goals. We have to have specific actions. We have to list our expenditures, and we also have to have our metrics. What are we going to be measuring to ensure that we're meeting our goal and that the expenditures make sense? There's a couple of other details that we have to be very aware of as well. While our LCAP addresses kids across the district in all groups, we have to also concentrate on 3 important groups. That's English learners, homeless foster youth, and our SED students. So again, we will try to support students across the district, but we have to specifically touch and support these groups. We also are guided in some of our priority areas. The state of California sets some of the things that we have to address in our plan. Talk about student academic achievement, campus climate, their access to a broad curriculum, parent engagement, but we also get to identify our own local goals. And Rick's going to talk a little bit about some of the goals we've set for this current 3-year plan.
Yeah, we align the LCAP to match the district goals and also to match the individual site single plans for student achievement or SBSAs. So that as an organization, we're lined up from district goals, LCAP goals, site goals, and we're all working towards the same thing. We basically break these down into 3 focus areas. Number 1 would be what we call first best instruction or rigorous and engaging instruction and curriculum. The second area would be a multi-tiered academic support. Largely, you can think of that as our interventions that the district offers, especially to those students furthest from standard. And then focus area number 3 would be an intentional culture of care. And that would be things like counseling, social emotional learning, and other things.
Can I
like
ask
that.
about that?
Of course.
What are the metrics we use for measuring focus 3?
We're going to hear a little bit about that in our next presentation on tier 1 data, and My Sabers would be one of those things that we use to measure
Right.
that, and we'll cover
Mainly
that.
survey. Okay, mainly feel. It's a mainly subjective.
Yeah,
measurement.
we've used numbers as well, like counselors, how many students they've seen, how many students get referred on to more in-depth counseling, I would say is something that we use. Just the number of lessons that we do using second step, which would be the curriculum for social emotional learning, that type of thing.
Okay, thanks.
You bet.
A critical requirement that we have in writing our LCAP, and actually I think this district really embodies, is this idea of gathering feedback. We have to gather feedback from stakeholders across the district. And I think this graphic gives you an idea of the groups that we go to gather this feedback. Sometimes the feedback is through survey, and we do try to get teachers across our district to fill out a survey with their input about how the current LCAP is supporting students and what they'd like to see for the next one. We go to meetings across the district, like DLAC meetings and ELAC meetings. And yes, we ask them to do the survey, to complete that survey, but we also do activities with them. Talk to them about the things that we've implemented. Ask them how they resonate with their kids, how they've improved their experience, how they've improved their achievement, and get feedback that way. So it is the survey, it's conversation, and it's also opportunities for small groups to give feedback to people like Rick Mayfield or the principal on their campus. Other groups that you will see on this list is our Student Senate. We ask our students to give us feedback, and it's critical feedback about what they're seeing and feeling on their campuses. We go to our Common Ground Advisory Task Force. We go to the District Equity Team. We go to the Title I group that Mr. Mayfield works with as well. So if you go around the spokes of this wheel, you will see a very comprehensive list of the people who we solicit feedback from. And again, the feedback is critical. Now, one spoke on this wheel that we want to spend a little bit of time on is the LCAP advisory group. And Rick, will you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. We do specific activities with the LCAP advisory group to work on the LCAP over a period of time. We've already met right before a winter break with the LCAP advisory committee. We looked at the survey instrument that goes out to all staff and all the community members as well, parents. And we kind of honed and tweaked that survey, and we're finalizing those changes in the survey now. It will be out to the public relatively soon. And also Mr. Pinkerton and Mrs. Frost will begin to go around to the schools to do a presentation on the LCAP, and then the survey is passed out to staff at that time. The LCAP advisory group then would take all of the input from the survey and from the specific activities that we do and disaggregate that input. We do specific activities with the equity team. We do it with the DLAC group. That happens in February at the DLAC Fiesta evening. The LCAP advisory committee itself does a specific activity on gathering input. And then this year, I'm going to go out to each of the Title I ELAC meetings. In fact, I booked those today to happen in January, February, and early March, again, to do a specific activity with parents to explain them the process and then gather their input into the LCAP. Mr. Banfield.
I'm unfamiliar with the term disaggregate.
Break the data apart. So we're going to take that input and break it apart and see what do the students say, what do the parents and community say, what does the staff say about things that we should do in next year's LCAP in those 3 goal areas, which I explained previously. And then the LCAP Advisory Committee is made up of staff, it's made up of parents, and it's also made up of students. And we have students from both comprehensive high schools, and we've added students this year from the middle schools. Thank you, Mr. Buckman. And, you know, every year we've increased the number that we get back. This year, we're going to go, you know, even further in terms of getting input in this process. I think I shared with you last year when I met with the county at the end of the process last year, and they asked, how did you go about getting input? And I explained all the activities that we were doing. They said, oh, lady said, wow, I've interviewed a number of districts, and I think that's about 10 times more than all those districts put together. So we do everything we can to get all of the input possible into what needs to happen within our LCAP.
And then finally, this is the first of several times that we will be coming to the board to talk about our progress. And this is just kind of a roadmap that tells you those board meeting dates and what we will be discussing. Our next one, we will be talking about some of the specific feedback that we receive, and we will give you examples of what that is. Mr. Unger?
So a question, every year you modify what you do a little bit with the hopes that we get more and more participation because we know that this is really important. What changes do you see that you've made from last year to this year?
We hired elementary counselors.
Our MTSS structure, counseling.
What I'm more referring to is not specifically what supports are we doing in the LCAP, but in terms of the survey and gathering the information, how have you tweaked that so that we hopefully will get even more and more? Because it sounds like you've made a few modifications to the process for getting the feedback. So that was more what my question was about.
Yeah, I would say that
Outreach, yeah.
2 things I would say. Number 1 would be tweaking how we gather that information back from people to make it more user friendly. The LCAP is 170 some odd page document, and to basically explain that to people and then say, we want to gather your input into how to make this better is a difficult thing to do in an hour and a half activity. So tweaking how we do that, delivering of that message and getting that information back would be number 1. And then the specific activities I think are very helpful. Rather than just send the link out and say, here's a survey, you can do it and give us your feedback. We sit down with the DLAC and we have a number of different facilitators that sit in groups of parents, and we'll invite you to that event in February and explain it to them in person and gather feedback that way. And I think we do it with the equity team, we do it with the LCAP Advisory Committee and some other groups. So I think by doing that, and then this year I'll go out to all the ELACs individually and do an activity with those folks. And I think that helps to gather more quality feedback and certainly more feedback.
We've also utilized Zoom too. I'll jump in. So especially like a lot of staff meetings when Diana and I will go, it's mainly just certificated staff. So by we had a couple of other opportunities where anyone, after school or before school, where our classified staff could join in and participate. So utilizing, I think, technology and those opportunities, I think, did increase the number of people that were able to join in and hear those presentations.
Stoller, did you have a question?
Yes, I do. What can we do to make sure that there is good knowledge sharing for our parents, since we want to engage them more? We've had some discussion. I've had some writings with Dr. Prater and other people regarding that. We had like major PD trainings that the parent leaders weren't even aware of, and may have stayed that way. But I'm asking that they receive some sort of training so they all know what's going on. And I might even kind of nervous to suggest this, but I would even suggest that we have very reliable parent leaders. I've been to their meetings, via Zoom. And I know that they're very responsible. So is there anything to keep them from, or like, maybe there are some rules and regulations I'm not aware of, but from participating in some of these PDs, just because they would be a very limited group, and then they could pass the information on to their other parents.
I'm going to ask Dr. Prater for input on
Yeah,
this as well.
we do regular updates on our activities to the board in terms of what we're getting up to in terms of professional development. Generally, it's not something that we would put out necessarily ahead of time. When we conduct staff meetings, we do professional development basically at every staff meeting that we have. And oftentimes those are shared certainly with the board in Friday notes. They're shared through Dr. Prater's newsletter. We put in items under ed services, under business services as well, some of the directors, and about different activities that are going on, and they're shared out in that capacity. In general, we haven't invited parents to participate during a staff meeting time because that's reserved for staff to work on things, within
Right, but
the
this would be a select
within that
group.
particular group. But yeah,
This would be a select group. And also, they had no idea about that training.
I'd like
So-
to have Dr. Prater weigh in, please.
Yeah, I just would, I think it's really important to recognize our team's philosophy in being transparent. And the risk of that is that we can blur lines that are traditionally meant for specific audiences within an organization. So when we do trainings, we're designing those trainings for that specific audience based on the feedback coming from that audience. And we're hearing it even to this day, even in our staff surveys that we're giving out feedback to our site administrators. They're really hungry for meaningful professional development for them. Now, I have blurred the lines because of my desire to be transparent. I have blurred the lines a bit by inviting board members to my student senate, to professional development really geared towards staff, not the board. But I'm proud of what we're doing, and I think it's really important stuff. And so typically, when we have professional development, we don't put it in our newsletters to parents and say, this is what we're doing. Sometimes principals will do that and sometimes they won't. But what the translation of that often is if you're giving a professional development training for staff around safety or around inclusivity, then that is what you project out to the parent community, saying these are the things we're working on to encourage and develop safe and inclusive schools and classrooms for all kids. And I'm proud of that. So I don't feel comfortable. Now, I know the parent leader group that you're referring to, and I think they're amazing, but I do think it sets up something in motion that I don't believe creates safety when you're talking about some of the things that we're working on, because it does require some vulnerability. It does require a whole lot of trust. And in these times, that's important. But I believe we can still be transparent. We will remain transparent, but we need to be clear about some of our boundaries. And our professional development with our staff should not be a public audience. It's just not the nature of how we develop our people. That's typically an internal design. So that would be my thought on that. Now, it does raise another question, which is, are there parent opportunities to do a parallel course? And I would say absolutely. And that's something that has triggered my thinking for a while now, that it's important that parents understand what we mean by inclusivity and what we mean by safety, and how can they help contribute to that and not detract from it, right? But if they don't know what that means, then they'll have a difficult time being our partners. And I am one superintendent who believes partnerships with our parent community is critical and essential. So do we invite parents to our staff professional training? I would say no. Do we create a parallel course and provide opportunities for parents to learn about the things that we're doing, to get their input and get their feedback on? I think would make great sense.
Well, that's what I approached you about, actually, was about the parallel.
Yeah,
That's what we've had numerous correspondence
Yeah.
about. But,
Yeah.
but I thought in addition to that, why not just have the most trusted core of parents, since we're talking about the LCAP, we want strong parent engagement, could just be in the meeting. Okay, you've already said that now. You've already stated why not.
Yeah.
So I would definitely look forward to that parallel training, which you said probably would happen in this trimester, thought you said.
Well, we're currently working off of a budget and a plan, as you all know, that has been developed since last summer based on last year's feedback. So this is something that we're doing now to improve what we do for next year. We already have built and put in place the mechanisms for this year based on last year's feedback. Not to say that we're not agile or nimble enough, but I do believe that we can build that. And by the way, I believe our parent community would welcome that and really see it as a value. And so I could envision that. To get to Mr. Unger's previous question, what have we done differently this year than we did last year, or the previous year? And what I would say it wasn't raised, because this is where my brain goes. What I would say we've done better and differently, which has increased our understanding of complexity, is that we have done a better job of the higher order thinking skills synthesis. So synthesizing the feedback from a variety of groups and really trying to figure out what it all means together in the most meaningful, impactful way. That's what we're starting to do as an organization. We're beginning to learn from our mistakes or from our shortcomings or from the things we believe we can do differently. And I'm proud of that. So I would say, are we able to do something like that this year? Well, it's not in the plan to do that. It's not, we didn't budget for it. It's not to say we couldn't begin the process, but I do see that as something that we could build on for the following year. Mr. Buckman.
Yeah. So to Eve's point, every year we talk about, there's a whole section on the LCAP about parent and family engagement. And what I'm hearing is we have our very first suggestion to go to build into the process for the coming year. I mean, this is valuable, and it's one of my favorite topics to talk about. And this sounds like it just fits right in with being the very first recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayfield, Ms. Frost. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think the last slide is about the implementation timeline. And I think the takeaway is that we will continue to come back to the Board of Education with updates on our progress, on the goals and action, all of that for your understanding and really for your feedback as well.
Thank you. Is there anyone from the public who would like to add to this discussion? Okay, seeing none. Any more board, Mr. Banfield?
I'm curious to know if we as board members have access to, well, let's say, a synopsis of the staff training.
Yeah, we gave, do you mean like a particular staff training?
Well,
or
I think, for example, I believe it was mentioned, I miss things, something about hate.
Yeah, so excellent question, Mr. Banfield. Normally, what we do is when we have these trainings, we provide an update of the training to the board. Now, if there is, like, for example, last Friday, in Friday update to the board, Ms. Frost provided the I believe did you provide the board with the template for that particular training?
in Friday Focus?
Yeah, so we have a 30-page template, which includes the whole training. Now we updated the board on the fact that we had that, but that's something that I would, easily and share with you. It's developed by our attorney. I thought we shared it. We did see it. I
Maybe we did.
could have sworn it was in there. I'm sorry, it was a blur.
The
Everything's a blur.
PowerPoint was, I think the PowerPoint was developed by Josh Whiteside.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah,
That's
and
exactly
we
right.
did get
Yeah.
that, as a matter of fact.
I do agree with what Dr. Prater is saying. When we have a training in the district, we do try to update the board during Friday Focus in that document about the content, oftentimes including pictures and some teacher feedback as well.
I'm sorry to say this, but we had a major one and most of the board didn't know that it was even going on.
Well, I would say that, I would argue as one trustee here that I feel very well informed and I don't feel the need, well, I also work full-time, so I cannot attend everything that goes on. But I would state that I feel very well informed and I feel that if I have questions, we do value transparency. It is here and we do learn about things. And I don't mind if I learn about something after the fact, at least I know what's going on. I know it has occurred and I trust that what we are doing is in alignment with our board goals and objectives that the board has set. So I feel that part of my role is to with the board, set the goals and objectives, and then have Dr. Prater and staff carry those out. So that's, I'm perfectly satisfied with that.
I just want to say, I appreciate what you're saying. And, but I also felt like, wait a minute, I lost my train of thought. Let me come back to it. But I didn't feel as informed about certain things. And it's not for me a matter of trust. I totally trust people here in their integrity and in the entire district. But in my position, I'm an overseer. And I don't just say, okay, boys, you take the reins and I'll just sit back and you tell me when it's over and wake me when it's over. I want to be engaged and I want to be an overseer because that's what I was elected to do.
Anyone, Mr. Banfield?
Just as a follow-up, Dr. Prater, I found it.
All right.
That's great.
So things like this will always be on the Friday Focus.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, that's
And-
good to know.
And
Yeah,
it
we-
takes a while. You've got some time to figure these things
Okay,
out.
but this,
Yeah,
very good. Thank you.
thank you.
Yeah, and really, the last thing I would like to say on this topic is we are in an organization of complexity. There's a whole lot going on when you talk about LCAP and you talk about the board priorities. And when the board establishes those priorities, you are saying to me, here are the things that we want you to do and what we're going to hold you to account for. We take those priorities and develop a plan. And within those plans, we do hundreds of presentations, hundreds of trainings, and it would be very difficult for the board to oversee every single one of those. And I'm not so sure it is the board's role to do that. What I do think is important is that the board hold me to account that the trainings that we do align to those goals and to those priorities. And I believe we've done that. These are tricky times though, in that there are differences of opinions about what it means to create safe and inclusive schools, or not so much in terms of closing the achievement gap. But I do believe that we've entered into a time where public schools are expected to do more and more to care for an increasingly complex environment an increasingly complex student body. And I take my hat off to our teachers. I take my hat off to our principals and our support staff and our parents for entering into that partnership of trust with us. And I do take that very seriously, and I try my best with our team to honor that trust. And so for me, I think what we've done and what we continue to do is learn from our ways of communicating. And because there are, I mean, it would take me 2 hours to go through that behavioral slide deck, right? And really absorb it. 2 hours. And that's one of many trainings we do, TK through adult school. And I just want to, honor those nuances and the complexity and the work that we do, but I also honor what you're saying, Ms. Dobler-True, in that I do also believe for those board members that want to take that upon themselves, that, I'm trying to give you the information as soon as I have it, and as soon as I feel that it's, appropriate to share, that I try my best with our team to give you as much information, credible, relevant data as I can give you every week. And so those are my thoughts on that. And hopefully I'll get better and better at this.
I would also add that of the 7 or so questions that are on the LCAP, one of them involves equity and has a link to the district equity roadmap for people who really want to dive in for information on the things that we're doing, and then ask for input. What else can we do to help our district be more inclusive for students? So parents have an opportunity to chime in there as well. Okay.
Thank you. Anything else on the board? Okay, thank you so
I'm
much.
ready for the next
Oh,
one.
you just get to stay there, Mr. Mayfield. All right, our next item is 10.02 trimester 1 elementary common assessment update.
Yes, I've mentioned this a couple of times, but we are getting back on a regular cycle of reporting to the board, student information, academic and social emotional, and more of a regular cycle. And so trimester benchmarks were established in large part to be linked directly to our curriculum. And so that as opposed to the SBAC, which is not linked directly to our curriculum. We do also have FastBridge data to share with you tonight, and then some MySabers data will be shared by Angela Riles at the end of the presentation. But we'll start with our data guru, Laura Storm, who's going to walk us through reading, writing, and mathematics benchmark assessments from trimester 1, which ended towards the end of November, before the Thanksgiving break. This is Storm.
I'm very frightened to be called the data guru. That's a high bar.
We all call you that behind your back, Laura.
Oh, do you? My high school math teacher would be definitely questioning that. So I am going to talk about elementary common assessments. Like Mr. Mayfield said, these were administered the end of October, the beginning of November, and they do align and inform the report card. So the thing to remember about this is we are talking about grade level proficiency or trimester proficiency. So the bar, did the student meet the bar? That's really all we're asking here in reading, writing, and math. So we're going to start with the A reading assessment. This is an assessment we use in the FastBridge suite. It is the most like the CASP or the SBAC that we have, and it's a broad reading achievement measure. So it tells us, are students reading on grade level or not? So when you look at this, we pulled last year's trimester 1 and this year's trimester 1, and this year is a little bit better. And I want to show you a little bit about why this is interesting. This is what jumps out at me. 2nd grade. And these 2nd graders were kindergartners the year that we were closed 2/3 of the year. And I was a little bit alarmed. I went back and looked. They started the year actually with 29% meets or exceeds. So we're already seeing a lot of growth in T1. And the same thing happened with the 2nd graders last year. They started at like 26 and jumped up to 44. And now look at in 3rd grade, they're at 73. And what I'm going to say about this is this points to me to the structure of MTSS, putting resources where we see the need, and it's gotten a lot into these primary grades, and we see the amazing growth from that. And so the last one related to reading achievement in 2nd through 6th is broken out by subgroup. Am I stopping?
Well, Mr. Buckman, did you have a question?
You see 3 sections in each bar.
Yep.
Needs, exceeds, approaches, and not yet. Is this the way it's reported, or is it reported exceeds, meets? Are there 4 separate categories?
So we can pull 4. What I did is I went back and looked at the previous reportings that we've done in years past, and this is how we've been reporting for years. So I just sort of kept it the same. We can break it out. It's interesting, some assessments don't offer us the exceeds option, or they group it together. So it just kind of depends.
Or it would be interesting to see, for example, grade 2 to grade 3 that meets or exceeds, how much came from not doing so well, but the next one down. And I think the data's there. It might be interesting to get where it's available. It might be interesting to get the 4 sections, because I think in a way it might look really exciting.
Yes. Yes. And I could share more. I mean, let's be honest, you guys know I could be up here for 10 hours, right? So yes, we could dive deeper into that if you'd like. So the last one related to reading achievement in the upper grades is by subgroup, and we look whole district, non-SED, economically disadvantaged, English learner, and break it out. And again, you'll notice the achievement gap stands out. The thing that gets exciting is when we start to track through the year and we're able to see our subgroups outgrow, say, like the non-SED or the district. So we will keep watching for that. So the K1 benchmark assessment system, this is the reading achievement measure in grades K and 1. The teacher sits one-on-one with the student, listens to them read, and then asks them some questions about whatever the passage was, fiction or nonfiction. We do this 3 times a year, and it gives us a reading level. So you can see here over the years, we have on the left 1920, so before COVID, and then we go 61, 55, 58. And what's interesting here is last year I kind of had this assumption that like everything was back to normal and kindergarten would be just kindergarten and it would be fine. And we really didn't see that. We had a couple things go on in kindergarten that was kind of interesting. One was masking, which it could be challenging to learn your sounds when you can't see your teacher pronouncing the sounds, right? So that was kind of one piece. And our kindergartners had a lot of absences. I believe over like 60% of them were chronically absent with like the COVID, quarantines and things. Kindergarten, it was really challenging. So we aren't quite back to normal, but we're at 62% that are on grade level in first grade and 53, I think I should get classes in kindergarten, and we know we will get there. We'll get them there. And then broken out by subgroup again. And here we don't have any Rees designated fluent English proficient students in there because they're in kindergarten and first grade, and we probably haven't reclassified them yet. So let's look at writing. Writing in trimester 1 is probably a narrative in each grade level, telling like a personal story. The students get a prompt, they write on demand, and then teachers score. And here we are pretty much in line with where we were. We are approaching pre-COVID. Writing was challenging during COVID. You may remember Mr. Mayfield talking about modifying the assessments, things like that. It was challenging in distance learning. And our population we again see achievement gap. And this is grade level. And I would just want to point out that if you were to look at the writing rubrics by grade level, so you start at kinder, right, and you work up into 5th and 6th, there is definitely a jump in expectations as you get into the upper grades, right? More writing, more dialogue, more building out of ideas. And so you kind of see that as students go up the grades, that the expectation jumps. So let's talk about math. The math assessments are based on the trimester priority standards. So this is truly what was taught in the trimester. So teachers are able to see, did students learn what I taught? It's not multiple choice, it's constructed response. So a lot of times students have to not only, give the answer, but they have to say how they got to the answer or draw a picture, or so there's a lot of mathematical understanding that's graded in these assessments, and it's all adapted from our curriculum. So we are making good progress in math. I know it's 2%, but 2% is 2%. And we are getting back to where we were kind of before COVID. Math has been challenging because students are definitely showing that there's some gaps. And I always liken it to like a brick wall, right? You're trying to build on top of, and then there's like a missing brick and things kind of come down. So teachers have had to work to sort of shore up some of those mathematical pieces. And here we see by grade level. And again, we get up into the upper grades and it gets a little more challenging. And our subgroups. What I really think is the most important thing with the data is what we do with it. We can have all of this, but if we don't do something with it, it doesn't matter. So in December, all of the grade levels had planning days. So for example, at Hawthorne, 2nd grade came together, they met with Mrs. Tricamo, they met with their MTSS teacher, they looked at the data, they looked at student progress, they did plotting of whether students were high growth, high proficiency, low growth, high proficiency. Mr. Buckman?
Why don't you finish this slide and
Okay.
I'm going to take you back a slide.
Okay.
Thanks.
And really just talked about individual students and what they needed to progress. And I think that's the most important thing that we can do with this information is put it into action. All of the sites did all staff meetings where it wasn't just teachers, but classified employees were there. And there was a lot of celebration around student growth and students that maybe exited from tier 2 interventions and just general sort of, good feeling about progress that was made in trimester 1. And we're continuing to look at those reading interventions. I've talked about this a lot, about that we're seeing we need to make some changes. And so now in the upper grades, we've shifted some students from leveled literacy intervention into Sunday system based on what we saw in their trimester data. And we just started today screening in K1 using the FastBridge early reading tool. It's very skill-based. And so we'll see, do students have those early reading skills under their belt? And then we had a math intervention pilot in 5th grade that wrapped up right before winter break. So we're taking a little bit of time getting feedback from MTSS teachers, looking at, what would we do to improve math intervention in the future? And then we hope to roll with something again in trimester 3. So, Mr. Buckman.
Yep. Thank you very much. If we could go back to slide 17, and I'm sorry I wasn't quick enough.
Is it this one?
Yes, please. So one of the things that jumped out to me, sorry, on this, we're not at a zoo. One of those things that jumped out was I looked at socioeconomically disadvantaged and I looked at reclassified. It just may be a built-in prejudice, but I was kind of amazed that reclassified is doing, really jumping ahead. And so I was wondering if there was a concept or some idea of what causes that. Is there more staff that's working with a reclassified student than an SED student?
So a student that's been reclassified, we have said they have English proficiency, right? And that we're confident that they can kind of move out of those more intensive English learner services. And I think it translates over into math as well. And if you were to look at these math assessments, you would see that there's a lot of language on them. And so, you know, we don't reclassify just on English language arts. So when I was a principal, I would look at their math scores as well. So that doesn't necessarily surprise me.
And I appreciate that. But what I'm wondering is why? So we have students that are not speaking English. And so my assumption, and I'm sorry, this is, you know, like a systemic racism type thing inside me. My assumption is that there's going to be slower learning because they're not speaking the language. And so we're working with them, bad assumption, but we're working with them really hard to get them to do English. So I'm asking, is there more staff per student in a redesignated program or in an English language learning program than it may be available to an SED student, or more effort, or more?
There might be more before they're reclassified.
Right, exactly.
There might be more intentional language development, which may support some math language. I also have to wonder a little bit about ST math, where there's no language at all. You know, in that interface. So I don't have a good answer. I don't think that there's I think it's, you know, the language support that any
I can add to it a little bit too. I think,
thanks.
Again, when you reclassify a fluent English proficient student, this is a student that is proficient already.
Right.
So you'll notice there's only 38 of those versus the 344 English learners.
Yeah.
So it's almost like cherry picking a little bit. Like we're going to cherry pick the English learner students that are proficient, like they're already excelling. And so, yeah, honestly, I would want them to be as high as the non-socioeconomically disadvantaged kids, right? Like that, they should be pushing 77%, right? Like that would be the goal for that group of students.
Yeah.
So Laura,
So a redesignated fluent English proficient student is a former EL. So when they're ELs and they're highly successful on the SBAC, then they get redesignated. So that you're dealing with a group of former ELs who got all the services that ELs get, who are highly successful on difficult tests, who are then known as RFAC.
And so, sorry, just to come back to this now, because you said all the support that an EL gets. I have no problem with support for EL students. My problem, and where I'm sort of hiding my cards here, is my problem is are we giving enough support to SED students? Similar support that we would give to an EL. So if SED was a language that we needed to teach, are we giving similar support to SED students?
I believe we are through the
Okay.
MTSS process.
Great.
Yeah, one thing that sort of jumped out at me, which I think is something that we can celebrate, is if we look at realizing that there are two different assessments, the math trimester assessment on slide 17 and the reading assessment on slide 5, we're actually seeing better math results. We're seeing a smaller, albeit not super significant, difference between our SED and non-SED students with math than we are with reading. And so I think that's something that we'll be exploring at some other point, but I think that's very interesting. And I think that's something for the district to celebrate.
It definitely is a celebration. Yes, Mr. Banfield.
Well, back on slide 14, under math trimester assessments, the first bullet says focus on priority standards. What does that mean?
So our curriculum and the state have identified kind of what are the most important standards within the math unit or the year of learning math. So the assessments align to those standards. So for example, there might be in second grade 5 items about telling time. I'm just making things up, but because that's deemed like more important, say than, is it a rectangle versus a triangle? So things are weighted, and our state assessment weights standards as well. So our assessment is a little bit weighted in that way, imperfectly, but
So weighted by the state?
by like the state and the national, like what are the key priority things for the grade level? There's definitely standards that jump out.
Thank you.
Ms. Storm. We've invested a ton of money in
Yes.
MTSS
Yes.
over the last 3 years.
Yes.
Okay. And for all the right reasons, in my opinion. In your assessment, I'm looking at this here. What's working? What's not working? What are you most happy about? What are you most concerned about?
So let's start with what is working. What I didn't bring, because this is the trimester assessment, is the risk data of students that are some risk, high risk, low risk. And when you look at that, our students are moving, and the students that are in our subgroups are moving more than students that are not. It's really exciting. The issue is that you can be moving. Here's the grade level band, right? And you have students that are high risk and they move into some risk and they're still not at grade level, but they're making progress. And so the thing that's most exciting for me and for all of the MTSS team and everybody, teachers, we see the growth. They're growing. They're just not at the grade level band yet. So I'm hoping by T3, these numbers are amazing because they're moving. I think that's really exciting. I think the diversification of the interventions is exciting. I'm really looking forward to seeing the K1 early reading data that we're doing right now, to see if we see a difference in how our K1 students are doing with their early reading skills. One continued challenge is just students that have multiple services. We have students that say need a reading intervention. They're also an English learner, and maybe they have speech, and it becomes how much are they getting support in class? How much are they getting pulled out? That's the dilemma about the math intervention, is you have students that need both, and then pretty soon you're missing too much core. So that continues to be something we can't answer. And then I would love to figure out a great solution to what does intervention look like in middle school and high school in a way that doesn't strip students of their electives. Because I know electives matter. And I don't have a good answer.
So by the end of this year, hopefully you can present to the board really concretely what's working, what's not working, and
Yep.
what's worth keeping.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Okay.
And my hope, finishing up with Dr. Prater was saying, is hopefully those will be parts of the discussion we'll have when we presented with the LCAP proposals.
Absolutely. I think that's key for the LCAP. There's a lot of funding things in the LCAP, right, that are tied to MTSS. So absolutely. I am going to turn it over to Mrs. Riles to talk about Savers.
Hi, I'm Angela Riles. I've talked to you guys before. If Laura is the guru of data, I would say school counselors are the polar opposite. We're more read the room, feel the feels kind of people. But we're going to present some data to you today and see how it goes. So I'm here to present to you our SEL Fast Bridge screening tool data. And that is called, through the Fast Bridge suite of services, the SABRS and the My SABRS. And SABRS stands for the Social, Academic, and Emotional Behavioral Risk Screener. And what that screener does is exactly what it says. It screens in the areas of social, emotional, and academic behaviors. And the screener is a 20-question screener that students take. We're having students take it in the fall, winter, and spring of this year. And those screeners have various questions such as, I get along with my peers. I like school. I am worried. So they're very simple, non-complex questions for students, and it's easy for them to answer. Then using a Likert scale, those students answer from 1 to 5 where they fall onto kind of that scale of things. A lower point value actually leads to a higher risk number. So students are then identified high risk, some risk, or low risk, similar to the same as the reading assessments you just heard from. And really, I think, it's those students that are showing higher and more positive coping skills and strategies as answers to those questions are assigned a higher point scale. So again, those students are assigned some level of risk. Now, the teachers take a very similar screener called the SABRS, and that's a 19-point scale where students or teachers are asked to respond to things like disruptive behavior, positive attitude, prepared for instruction, and they answer those questions in a never, sometimes, often, or always manner, right? And then again, students are assigned some level of risk based on how the algorithm works. And so again, high risk, some risk, or low risk. This data is then kind of all pumped out in the same way from the various assessments we just saw, and our school counselors and members of the school team are taking that data and assessing it and reviewing it. This year is the first year that we've really consistently done this assessment 2nd through 8th grade. That's what the assessment is available for. And we really encouraged and had each site not take that data, really look at it strongly, and then discuss it with care team members, and then push out the data to staff members. And so what I have here for you is just some real general information that we pulled from that. And I think what's really important to remember when we're talking about a screener of all sorts, even the academics we've talked about today, is it's just a piece of a puzzle. It's one metric in a big picture of information we're gathering about a child. And especially when we're talking about social, emotional, and risk factors in that area, this is definitely does not paint the whole story for our students. It's just one piece of understanding the risk level that they might be at. Can I? Yeah.
I'm sorry, SEL.
Social emotional learning. Yeah.
Thanks. And so I have to admit, I'm not a data guy, so.
Me either.
Well, I'm also apologizing to. I'm looking at this and I'm saying, okay, I've heard about students at risk, and we have counseling and we have support for them, and we can even refer them to their parents and off. Okay, but this is the first time I've seen numbers for teachers at risk. And the numbers are, sorry.
The teachers are assessing the student.
That's what my question was.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I apologize. That should have been made more clear, but we could do an assessment on teachers.
That would be interesting, right?
Yeah.
Because I was actually amazed at how close the percentages were.
Right. Yeah.
2.1.
I'm gonna get
2.2, like,
I'm gonna get into that.
Are they the same kids?
They are the same
Finding
kids.
that this, like the highly.
They are the same kids. And if you look at these two numbers, you'll see that, there's some variant and really, like with any assessment, there's a benchmark breakpoint between high risk and some risk. Some of these kids are only 1 point, maybe difference between being high or some risk. So, when you look at this, some things that we took right away from it is like, wow, our teachers really know our kids, and our kids, are really actually, when we look at the numbers, they really fall into what would be a typical MTSS tiered model of support kind of structure, right? We don't ask them to fall that way, but that's typically how we know kids fall. Top 3 to 5% of students have high needs that need really intensive services. About 15% of students, similar to the tier 2 supports in academics, need some form of service, and somewhere between 80% of students generally get a typical tier 1 universal supports for all.
So I was joking earlier. I was amazed at the match as is Ryan.
Yeah.
So have you looked at Or is it possible to get, is our district just amazing? I mean, I know our staff's amazing, but
Yes, we are.
is this some absolute, is this uncommon that it's this match? Because my sense is it might be.
That the number, I don't know. That's a good question to ask other districts that are taking Sabers. I guess if their numbers are as aligned as ours are between students and teachers, I think that that's an interesting metric that it came out that aligned. Of course, I would like to say our teachers really are tuned in to what our kids need. And so, just to get back to this model, you can see that, while we do have high risk numbers in our district, we're really, honing in on those high risks, and we're able to really meet them. Again, I want to remind everyone, this is K-8, I mean, 2-8, second through 8 that we're really
I
looking
have
at.
a quick question. How do the secondary teachers provide the evaluation of the students? Is it like their, whatever the equivalent of their homeroom teacher doing it?
Yes.
So
yeah.
it's obviously not every teacher, over 6
Right.
periods doing it. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And we're going to be redoing that with the second semester. So students will be taking kindergarten through 6th grade students will take this again in the winter and then again in the spring. And then our middle school teachers are going to retake it for their new students if they got new students at the semester. Okay. So the next slide here, just wanted to provide some information on schools. And this really gives you an indication of how schools met the same, different graph. Again, I'm not a data person, so I just played with all the pictures, but I liked this graph for these guys. And I think it really shows that our Title I schools do have a higher need. That orange and that dark blue area is the high risk and some risk area, and those really jumped out. Some things that we do see from this model is that, some of our students rated themselves more at risk than teachers did, and vice versa, but at particular sites, which I thought was really interesting as well. And yeah, so do we have questions about this slide?
Yeah,
specifically?
please. So as a counselor,
Mhm.
can you, why is there such a dramatic difference between the Title Ones? Can you give just an off, I know you don't know the exact, but can you give it off the cuff? I mean,
Yeah,
kids hungry.
poverty.
it's
The
it's
poverty
FDD.
gap in this world is significant. Trauma, ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, things that kids have been exposed to typically when they're coming from low income households. So I would say that plays, probably the biggest part. Of course, every school, every site, high or low poverty has trauma and kids that have high risk and need. Yeah. Okay, and the last slide here just gives some noteworthy trends that I want to make sure we look at. First of all, when we looked at our high risk students, I will say that over 90% of all students, probably closer to 95% of all students, were already receiving services. So again, this metric did not surprise us or show us anything that we weren't sure of. It kind of, in a sense, brought us some peace in knowing that we are really meeting the needs of our highest risk kids on campus. We did find some students that identified themselves as high risk that were not necessarily on our radar. And so that was the great part of having this opportunity, was we were able to reach out to those students and get them some services right away. This is our second year really completing this universal screener, our first year that we've been really thoughtful and specific about the expectations. And so I think as we continue to have longitudinal data and as teachers and students get used to taking this type of screener, we're going to get more and better information. And again, some of the trends we talked about vary between teachers and students who's high risk, but again, that's really could be like a benchmark or 1 or 2 question kind of change. Looking at the numbers, we did see some numbers where, our high risk students really, are higher at our Title I schools. And that's something that we need to continue to consider as we allocate services across our district. And then, most of the trends follow a tiered support system. And so on the previous slide, there is a link here in the corner to some of the approaches that we take within that tiered support and what students might be getting if they fall into a high risk category in one of those areas. But I just want to leave everybody with the idea that, in general, a lot of our students performed low risk, and that gives us some, knowledge base to know that tiered 1 supports that meet a lot of those kids' needs are being met within our classrooms. All right. Thank you.
Is
Yeah.
there, before you depart, let's just make sure, is there anyone from the public who has any questions or comments on this presentation? Any other comments or questions from the board? All right, thank you, all of you so much. This has really been informative and very useful information. Yeah. Anything else, Mr. Mayfield?
Well, I'm just getting ready for the next one.
Okay, well, actually, we're going to take a break. You've gotten to be up and moving about a bit, but those of us up here have not. So I know you've been waiting, our dual language folks. We really appreciate it. Just a few minutes more. If we could come back at 8:05, please, promptly, that would be great. Thank you so much. Mr. Unger, if you would join us, Mr. Buckman, we're ready to get started. Language Immersion Program update number 2.
Yes, good evening. As you mentioned, we're here to give you an update on our 2 dual language immersion schools. I'm here tonight with Principal Kirsten May from Baywood Elementary and Marcelo Huizar from Pacheco Elementary. And we'll cover a little bit about the dual language immersion task force that we're engaged in now, our ongoing work with consultant Rosa Molina. Each of the principals will give a little bit of an academic update on trimester 1 assessment data from their sites, and then we'll talk about the Spanish DLI curriculum pilots that we're engaged in right now. Okay, the board approved 3 years ago the addition of a coastal program. What bilingual education and dual language in particular does is provide students with cross-cultural competence, bilingualism and biliteracy, and high academic achievement. I didn't mention it at the time, but the 2 students from Laguna who presented were former Pacheco students. So I told them I wouldn't blow it in
They've
cover.
come, Mr. Mayfield, they've come so far.
Rosa Molina is Executive Director of ATDLE, which is the Association of Two-Way and Dual Language Education. Rosa helped us back at the beginning of the start of Pacheco Elementary, as when she was Assistant Superintendent up in, I believe it was San Jose or in the San Jose area. She has a wealth of knowledge. I spoke to her over the weekend. She'll be back down here on the 30th of this month to work with our teachers and to lead the task force in the work that the task force is doing. She provides technical assistance. We meet with grade levels on any particular topic that they care to discuss. They're asking a lot of questions about the curriculum adoption, which she has great knowledge about. And then, as I mentioned, she's facilitating the task force for K-8 dual language immersion programs within our district. We need to memorialize what this looks like, K-8, and then eventually look at the high school program as well. We need to strengthen our strands of dual language immersion through the middle schools. Research is solid that when students spend more time in dual language immersion up through 8th grade, that the results are strengthened by that. So the goal of the task force this year is to develop this master plan for DLI TK through 8 in San Luis Coastal. That will be brought in front of the board at the end of this year for you to review and possibly approve. The task force is composed of teachers, parents, and administrators from the DLI schools as well as both middle schools. It's led by Rosa, as I mentioned. We're going to have 6 to 7 meetings during this school year, and we've already had meeting number 1. Meeting number 2 comes January 30th. And then again, the final plan will be presented to the board in June. Okay, Principal Kirsten May from Baywood will share a little bit of Baywood data and intervention.
Hi, good evening. Ms. Storm kind of teed me up here with talking about this idea of proficiency versus growth. So we have about 4 slides from Baywood to look at today. And the first is that proficiency threshold. So at our English only schools, the BAS or the benchmark assessment system, that 1-to-1 reading is given to our kindergarten and first graders. At our DLI schools, Pacheco and Baywood, it's also given to our second graders, because we're really lacking another good way to assess a Spanish reading proficiency. So we extend that to our second graders. So what you're looking at here is first trimester results for Baywood students in kindergarten, first and second grade. And we'll just look at the whole cohort, that first line there. What you'll see is that 9% of our kindergarten students showed proficiency on the T1 BAS assessment. Now, that might seem like a low number, however, it isn't surprising. Many of our students come from English-only households, so considering that they were only exposed to the Spanish language for maybe 2 or 3 months before they took this assessment, although the number seems low, again, not surprising. So what's really exciting to me about this graph in particular is as you go into first grade, that 9% in T1 turns into 19% in first grade. So that they're not quite meeting that A, but we're getting closer meeting that E in first grade. And then with even more exposure to language in second grade, they're meeting that target at 43%. So over time, with more exposure to the language in the different grade levels, they are able to meet that grade level T1 benchmark. So to me, this is exciting, and it's just showing with more exposure to the language, we're getting more student at that benchmark level. But for us at Baywood, we're wondering, these benchmarks we're only getting at the trimester, what's going on in between? So we're dialing it down a little bit more using our MTSS system and our dual language immersion coordinator and her team of bilingual aides. And we are taking a closer look, and in kindergarten, what that looks like is how many letter sounds do our students know? How many of their Spanish letter sounds? And at the beginning of the year, we had 48% of our students in low risk for knowing their letter sounds. And we just did a recent fall screener, and we're at 95% of our kindergarteners are at low risk knowing their letter sounds. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they know all of their sounds. That means they're on track for knowing their sounds by the end of the year. And we're doing these screeners at a 2-week interval for all of our students who aren't showing proficiency right now. In first grade, so in kindergarten, that's letter sounds. In first grade, same trajectory in syllabus. So we're looking now, do they know their Spanish syllables that help them break apart words? And as you can see, we've increased our low risk by 13%. So again, we're continuing looking at this screener so that we can make sure that we are getting students the instruction that they need to be able to hit that proficiency mark at the next trimester. And in second grade, what that looks like is CBM, which is computer-based measurements. And again, following that same trajectory, we're taking students out of that high-risk category and getting more students into that low-risk category. Any questions about any of that? And then I'll turn it over to my colleague here at Pacheco. Okay, thank you. Oh, just kidding. I had one more slide. So to meet the needs of our students, we have full day kindergarten bilingual aides. We have GPR, or bilingual English learner aides, for our K2 Spanish reading, which is a push-in program. We have a win time with our academic intervention teachers. We continue to strengthen what Rosa Molina has helped us identify as an academic English language development time of the day for our students. That's where that 90-10, 80-20, 70-30 comes in for our 90-10 program. And again, the support of Baywood with our MTSS teacher and our DLI coordinator, really working in collaboration with me to carry out the goals of our school. And then we have this reading progress monitoring. And with the data that I showed you with our staff and staff meetings as professional development, we're looking at learning sprints. Who are our high achieving, high performing students, low achieving students, and how are we marking their progress within the trimester and not just at that trimester benchmark band.
Mr. Buckman.
Thanks. I just want to, these numbers are amazing. And it's like, I just want to congratulate you.
Thank you.
It's just great to see this.
Thank you. Hardworking staff, that's for sure.
That's for sure.
Thank you.
All right, good evening. Again, I'll start with the our kinder through second grade BAS assessment. And again, this is a Spanish assessment. And as my colleague Kirsten mentioned, for a lot of our students, this is their first angle, so to speak, with the Spanish language, because a lot of our kids are English only, come from English only homes. So we have to kind of put that into perspective. And we also have to understand that acquiring a second language takes time. So therefore, you're going to see sometimes scores when we're comparing these, and we're not doing that now, but when we compare it to district scores, then you're going to see those gaps. But I think as you're going to notice, as our students go into the second, third, fourth, fifth grade, you're going to see where it starts to level off, and in many cases, you know, the dual language students sometimes start to surpass our English only students or students attending English only schools. But so our scores here, again, kinder, we're in double digits in most categories. Double digits there, of course, but again, it's still not not surprising that we're there. But again, in first grade, and it's hard for me to see second. There we go. First and second grade, we start getting those gains. And I think in first, it's a very important year where our students are getting those foundational reading skills, and they're starting to read in Spanish. And then also in second grade, of course, we see some big jumps, as Laura mentioned earlier. And I think you're going to see that also in English, because I'm going to share some English data with you as well. Now here we have second through sixth grade English. This is English reading proficiency. So this is Lexile proficiency, which is FastBridge. They call it A reading. The first column here, the top column shows overall, meaning all the second through sixth graders at Pacheco. So beginning of the year, 46% of our students were proficient, meeting that benchmark. And then end of trimester 1, we had 56% for a growth of 10%. And now breaking it down by grade level, going down the rows, again, beginning of the year, second grade was 21%. End of the year was 36%. But if you notice sixth grade and we're at 52% at the beginning of the year, and then at 63% at the end of first trimester, which indicates that about roughly 2/3 of our students are meeting the benchmark at the end of first trimester. And the change, I think it's all positive. Could we do better? Yes. Are we working to do better? Of course we are. But I think that we're seeing positive growth up and down the grades. Are there any questions on this slide? It has a lot of information. And then here's breaking it down by subgroups, second through sixth grade, again, English reading, and by subgroups. I already mentioned that overall was a 56% by the end of first trimester. So we have social economic disadvantage, and then we have non-social economic disadvantage. We do see a gap. The encouraging part is that SED is making positive growth. Roughly 26% of our SED students were benchmarked at the end of first trimester. Non-SED is doing solid. ELs are at 17% at the end of first trimester. Again, not anything to write home about, but we do have a 10% increase in that. And then at the bottom, we have students with disabilities, which is a very, very small group of students for our site. Any questions for this slide?
I just want to say these numbers, improvement is better than some of the other places that we look at improvement in the district. So sometimes I think it was the LCAP or one of the others where we said, oh, we're 2%, we're going to strive for 2%, and we're obviously way above that. So was it a year or two ago? So thank you.
Yeah. And I think those are encouraging, and what we want to see is continued growth. We don't want to plateau anywhere here. All right, and interventions are very similar to Baywood's. As Kirsten mentioned, we have full day kindergarten aides, and that's another area too where we're hoping that having full day kindergarten is going to make a positive impact in our students as we go through this year and as we prepare them for first grade. We do have GPR, which is guided reading groups, instructional aides that are doing guided reading groups in Spanish and focusing on those kids that need the extra help. And then win time is what I need. So basically it's a workshop time when teachers are working on those areas or those the gaps that students have. And then that's generally when we also pull students out to work with the AIT teachers, and that's for their that's English reading. We also focus a lot on English language development. And then of course, our MTSS teachers, I don't have a DLI coordinator, but MTSS teachers are very involved in working with our GPR aides, working with our AITs. We do collaborations. We're talking about strategies. We're focusing on our students, and we're always putting data before them, but also next steps. As Laura mentioned, we always have to have a plan of where we go from there. And at the bottom, reading progress monitoring. And we're really also focusing in on the McDowell work that we've done. We're plugging in those strategies and we're talking about them and we're bringing them before the staff. We're going back to what worked for you, what didn't work, how can we change it? And again, we go back to, is this making an impact in our students? Any questions? I'm going to hand it back to Mr. Mayfield.
All across the district, we're working on taking a look at our reading curriculum in particular, and we've accelerated that process with our dual language immersion programs. So teachers are piloting the Benchmark Adelante program and the Wonders Maravilla program, which they heard about today. So they did a couple of units before the winter break and are continuing that now, and then they'll begin a couple of units with the second curriculum. And then we discussed with them today about looking at a third curriculum, which came to our attention about the middle of the fall. And we're looking at the calendar and seeing where we can fit that work in. Our hope is that we will have a curriculum adoption that really stands out for all the staff at both schools, that they can say, we're confident in this particular adoption and we'd like to adopt it. And of course, we'll bring that in front of the board towards the end of the school year. And this is basically what that timeline has looked like. October, piloting Adelante, late February or January, Maravillas, late February, a possible third pilot. We'll do some review and feedback, and I think that will be a robust conversation with exactly what that looks like. And then we'll get public input as we always do in the adoption process. And we'll have materials displayed and people will have an opportunity to come and check those out. And then May, we'll do a board adoption. And then if that is successful, then we'll look at training options for June and August. And Rosa Molina has said that she will assist us with the work that needs to be done. Once you select, there's still a lot of work to be done in terms of planning the school year, planning the units out, how they integrate to our math, social studies and science, things like that. So once we select the material, we'll still have a lot of work to do. And I will say that both programs do not have a strong writing program. And so we're talking about the option of continuing with Lucy Calkins' writing units of study, which are strong and very easily, more easily, I will say, translate to Spanish than the reading curriculum. And so that's the process we're involved in right now. And I'd be happy to, or either of the two principals, happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions or comments from the board? I'd like to go to the public, see if there's anyone with a question or comment about this. Great. Well, thank you, all of you. We look forward to seeing those numbers continue to advance as our students continue to benefit from the program and learn and become more accomplished in 2 languages, those lucky students. So,
As are we.
yeah.
Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
thank you. Thanks so much. All right, our next item is 10.04, the SIPE Joint Exercise Powers of Agreement.
Yeah, so we have a JPA established 1977, so going on 45 years now, where basically the school districts in the county of San Luis Obispo joined to kind of establish a group that would oversee workers' compensation. So instead of, you imagine every district running their own workers' compensation program and all that goes into it. So this group pulls resources together to do that. The board is made up of CBOs or superintendents for each school district as well as charter school throughout our county. I happen to be the president of the JPA and have been for the past few years. And so as president and working with basically the site staff there, we have decided to kind of clean things up over the past few years, kind of bring things together. And so part of that process with Garth Mejia leaving SIPE and kind of bringing a new person on as we decide, hey, we need to update some things to our investment policy, and in this case, the actual joint powers agreement itself. So hired an attorney that dealt with joint powers agreements, had him come in, look at the agreement, look at the changes that have been made since 1977. And so in order for us to have this new agreement in place, we had to go back. And so each of the school boards throughout the county will be voting. And so if enough school boards vote, then this will be the new agreement that will be established for July 1st. So this is, kind of pulling it all together, getting the information. So it was definitely time before Garth retired to do this and kind of get everything in line. And so kudos to him for a lot of the work that he's done over the past year to bring this forward today. And so we're asking the board to approve that. And I'm here to answer any questions you might have.
Actually, I'd like to make the motion to approve it, knowing that we'll have discussion later. And I wanted to thank you, Mr. Pinkerton, for the information you gave me. As you know, I had some concerns about potential investments, and you shared the investment policy with me, and I'm quite satisfied that it will protect the assets of SIPE, which is essentially our assets as we look at our workers' compensation. So I'm going to make the motion to approve it, knowing that we're going to have discussion and public comment.
Anyone else from the board? I'd like to go to the public, see if there are any comments or questions about this. Pardon me?
Can I second first?
Oh, can I? Sure, but, all right. And hearing nothing from the public, then we will come back. President Pinkerton, we will take the vote. We have a motion by Mr. Unger and a second by Mr. Buckman. Mr. Unger?
Yes.
Mr. Buckman? Mr. Banfield? Ms. Dobler-Drew? And I'm a yes. The motion carries 5-0 with one absence.
Thank you.
All right. All right. Our next item is approval of the 2024-25 instructional calendar. We're thinking that far ahead already.
People start making plans. We got to get stuff in place here. Last year we brought two because within COVID, we kind of got a little behind. So maybe that's what you're thinking. Last year we weren't this far ahead. This year, of course, we're a year and a half out. So this committee comprised of teachers, classified staff from different file and rank across the district. Administrators got together. We generally take out the calendar, a lot of things to consider when we make an instructional calendar. As you know, we have semesters and trimesters within our district and different length of trimesters, even within our district on the different levels. And we consider different things like testing windows from the state, AP testing at the high school level. We also take a look at calendars of other organizations in the area like Cuesta and Cal Poly. And we believe that, like on our spring break in particular and our holidays, we're thoughtful about where those are natural break for students when they're going to be good for our groups. Then we had a draft, we brought that to the principals, and here is our final copy that I bring to you today.
Right. Is there anyone from the public with a comment on this item? All right, any questions or comments from the board? Okay, and this is an action item seeking approval of this calendar. Can I have a motion, please?
I assume make a motion to approve the calendar.
Thank you. All right, we have a motion by Mr. Banfield and a second by Ms. Dobler-Drew, and I'd like to thank you, Mr. Unger, for keeping track of this. Mr. Banfield?
Yes.
Ms. Dobler-Drew? Mr. Buckman?
Yes.
Mr. Unger?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Motion carries 5-0 with one absence. All right, next is item 10.06, certification to the Board of Education temporary athletic coaches for the 2022-23 winter sports season.
Right, thank you. You may remember I came back to do to certify our fall coaches. So the same process, they have to meet the provisions in section 5593 of Title V. In your packets there, we have the document, the a certification from Phil Angel at Loams, from Jessica Manis at Lambs, from Tyler Hoyt at Morro Bay High School, from Kedini Meany, who's filling in at SLO High School. And they have certified that the coaches have met all necessary requirements.
Anyone from the public wishing to comment on this item? Any questions from the board, Mr. Buckman?
Yeah, I just want to make sure I got this right. Each of these folks is active in the classroom as well?
Not necessarily, no.
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
Okay.
They've just met the requirements to coach. So it's like first aid, knowledge of
Right.
their sport. Yeah,
But they're not necessarily also teaching.
not necessarily.
Okay, thanks.
Anything else? This again is, oh, while you're at it,
Yeah, but many of these folks are classroom teachers, which
Many are. right.
which makes this just all the more amazing. I mean, you just listed 2 or 3 things. There's probably a lot more,
Mhm.
and they're taking on this. I just kudos to all of them.
It is. And there are such advantages to having a coach that's a teacher on site, from continuity, and it's somebody we know. Recruiting coaches for our athletic directors is a big part of their job.
Mr. Buckman, would you like to make the motion?
Yes, I would be honored.
All right, and we need a second. All right, we have a motion by Mr. Buckman, a second by Ms. Dobler-Drew. Mr. Buckman?
Yes.
Ms. Dobler-Drew? Mr. Unger? Mr. Banfield? And I'm a yes. The motion carries 5-0 with 1 absence. Okay. Next is 10.07, request for allowance of attendance due to emergency conditions. President Pinkerton.
No, we cannot. No, I'm teasing.
Take it.
I prefer assistant superintendent in this position, right? Yeah, thank you for that. I appreciate that, actually. I appreciate that.
Peter is feeling a little threatened over here.
As long as Dan now leaves and there's nobody else in the audience, we're in good shape. So last Monday morning, we had quite the storm on the Central Coast, throughout the state of California. So much so that early morning phone call with in discussion with Dr. Prater, we decided it was best to cancel school that day. And for everyone out there and for the board to know, it is an absolute last resort to ever cancel school. I mean, I think the last time this may have come up in our county is like 1995 was the last time where there was like a major flood, and I think by noon that day, it was sunny. Because I remember I was the principal, I was at Arroyo Grande High School, and we sent all the kids home right away, and it was amazing how you could get rid of 3,000 kids at a high school in about 10 minutes, right? And then sure enough, like by noon, it was sunny. So as we're talking on Monday, it's like, are we going to do this? Really? Are we going to do it? And then, it like was absolute downpour. And so I said, but we got to call this, right? It stopped people. Fortunately, it was a late start day. And in hindsight, it was the best decision.
Well, you also had the emergency notice by the county.
Not yet, actually, not yet. So we didn't know for sure. Like the flooding that had occurred, those types of things had not had not kind of full on. I mean, we had been warned that, hey, this big rain was coming, those types of things. But until it really happens, and again, as I drove around South Bay Boulevard and I drove Morro Bay, and I saw kind of the aftermath of this storm, I thank goodness our buses were not running. And the kids and parents weren't driving, right? Or trying to walk to school, those types of things. So it was the best decision for the safety of kids. The second day, it was still disaster cleanup. So, driving around Ocean Air in front of C.L. Smith, completely flooded streets, right? So again, safety wise, we decided not to have kids come back to school that second day. Seeing that there was a break, we would be able to come back on Wednesday, which we did. So, there is a form, the J13, which we're asking you to approve tonight, which would basically relieve us of having to make those days up in the spring. So we bring that forward to you. Now, there is a change in the law that happened, and Diane Frost has been spending countless hours working with our attorneys on, we have to actually offer an independent study plan. And so Diane has put that together. So that's because of COVID. part of the law now to fill out this J13 form is you have to have a plan in place for instructional minutes. So should this have gone on for longer, what are you going to do to keep kids, in school basically, which is great and a good thing for us to have. But so Diane had to put all of that together, right? Not a COVID plan, but like change it and adapt it to what it is today. So she has that together, has been proof from Josh Whiteside. She's going to be sending something out to parents through Parent Square that will basically give them the opportunity, if they would like, to get 2 days worth of instructional work for their child who missed Monday and Tuesday. We will give that to them. But we are asking the board to approve this tonight. Again, this is not something that happens often, of course, in the school district. Some districts where they have snow days or things like that, it's an expectation. They build an extra week into the calendar, right? I mean, it's just part of it. But for us here, this is not a normal phenomenon, and hopefully one, honestly, that it isn't a normal phenomenon, kind of heading for. But 7 inches of rain did a lot of damage in a weekend around this area. So again, asking the board tonight to approve the J13. We have the plan in place that Diana's put together, and we will, if the board approves it, we'll push that forward to the CD.
Mr. Banfield.
Just a historical note, I remember that year I was teaching at Sunnyside, and then the instructional calendar after that for the next several years had these days marked with waves, and that was meant as a built-in safety should there have been something like that, But anyway,
I'll go to the public. Nothing. All right. I remember the last big storm. My kids were at C.L. Smith and we couldn't get there from where I live.
Mhm.
So I think at that time, as I recall, they didn't close all the schools. I may be wrong, but they closed C.L. Smith because no one could get there. There was water lapping at the school steps. Yeah. All right.
This is in my lifetime, this is the worst I've ever seen it. I mean, driving around in the area, Marsh Street, I watched a car when I was driving to work that day. I watched a car go into a four foot puddle trying to get off on Madonna.
Yeah.
And the police hadn't closed that off. They closed off Marsh
Right.
because of that, but hadn't hit that yet. I mean, it was just, so that was like what I saw going to work. And I just thought to myself, okay, this is not,
Yeah. Not good.
like we need to make some decisions about this. So
Yeah. You made a good choice for
Yeah.
the safety of our staff and students, and it's appreciated. Right. This also is an action item to approve this allowance of attendance.
I'll make a motion
Right.
to approve Form J13, the request for allowance of attendance due to emergency conditions.
Thank you. And a second.
I'll second that.
All right. We have a motion by Ms. Dobler-Drew and a second by Mr. Banfield. Ms. Dobler-Drew.
Yes.
Mr. Banfield.
Yes.
Mr. Unger. Mr. Buckman. And I'm a yes. Motion carries 5-0
Thank
with
you.
1 absence. 10.08 proposed revisions to board policy 200 goals for the school district. This is our first reading.
Yes, thank you very much. So it's 0-200 goals for the school district. Just some highlights of the changes. The board shall adopt long-term goals focused on achievement for all students. It talks about input from stakeholders, that we have to review the data to ensure the goals are being met, and it references LCAP goals. So super connected board policy for us to look at tonight, given our work on the LCAP. My recommendation is that this comes back for a second reading.
All right. Ms. Dawson. All right. No one from the public wishing to comment on this? Any questions or comments from the board? All right, then we'll bring this back for a second reading. Thank you. 10.09 proposed revision to board policy 3452 student activity funds. This also is a first reading.
Yes, thank you. Again, 3452 student activity funds. This governs the student body associations and all funding and expenditures through those organizations across our schools. It talks about fundraising, talks about expenditures, audits, and oversight. It also talks about training for staff who work with ASB funds, and then student responsibility and budget adoption. I recommend this comes back for a second read.
Ms. Dawson. All right, and back to the board. Any questions or comments? All right, this will come back for a second for approval at our next meeting. Thank you. All right, we're moving on to the action consent calendar. I'm going to go through these items. Please let me know if you'd like anything pulled. 11.01, approval of certificated and classified personnel items. 11.02, acceptance of donations. 11.03, approval of furniture and equipment request. 11.04, approval of purchase orders and CalCard purchases. 11.05, approval of warrants and payroll. 11.06, approve quarterly report on uniform complaint filings, the Williams settlement. 11.07, proposed revisions to board policy 6173, education for homeless children, second reading. 11.08, proposed revisions to board policy 6200, adult education, second reading. 11.09, authorizing continued use of remote teleconferencing provisions pursuant to AB 361 and Government Code Section 54953. Wow.
I move approval of items 11.01 to 11.09.
Right. And is there anyone from the public? All right, thank you. We have a motion by Mr. Unger, and I will second that motion. So, Mr. Unger.
Yes.
I'm a yes. Mr. Buckman. Yes. And our thank you. Ms. Dovler Drew. Mr. Banfield. All right, thank you very much. All right. Next is, anyone have anything for advanced agenda? All right, reports by board members. Mr. Buckman,
Yeah, you're not going to escape this.
gonna make up for it.
I'm going to make up for it. You know, we just heard tonight where families in economic stress, families living in poverty, it affects both their, in just two items tonight, affects their ability to learn and their ability to feel good about themselves and feel good, socioeconomic stress. And it reminded me of something I did a lot of reading on Monday about Martin Luther King, obviously. And it at some point towards the end of his life, before he was assassinated, his focus switched from, not entirely from racism and white supremacy, it switched to watching the economic inequity in his country. And this, you know, tonight made me think about this. And I just want to give just one quote from him because it was so powerful. Let's see. He was asked at one point if God had chosen to let him live at any point in history, where would he wanted to land? And he said, now, he said, he told people that he's happy he is where he is because the nation's sick. This is his words. Troubled is in the land, confusion all around. But I know somehow that only when it's dark enough can we see the stars. And, you know, I hadn't heard that quote before. So we're back in the 60s, the end of the 60s, and here we are at 2023. And we're still talking about, I don't know if everybody out in the public understands, 40% of the kids in our district are living in poverty. And that's, you know, yep, it's that high. And so that's, I needed to make that statement. I also just want to say a friend of mine just let me know from the city council meeting that they approved the Prado overpass and the new police station, and it's going to be done with community work agreements. Yeah. So that was kind of interesting. And I think that's it. Okay. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Banfield.
I would just like to thank the board president for hosting that Zoom meeting the other day for all the new trustees. That was very good.
Thank you for attending. I
Yeah.
hope we see you again.
Yeah. Well, I hope you see me because I've got to get that camera going.
Sort that out. Little glitch. Right. Thank you very much, everyone. This will adjourn the meeting and see everyone in February. Thank you.